What's up, Met fans? Welcome back to the channels as we are doing some instant reactions in the talk of all the latest Mets news and rumors today. And we're going to get all into it, guys. So it's going to be a quick rapid fire show. So we're just going to get right into it. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
You're good.
Uh-oh. It's on me.
Uh-oh. What happened? You don't hear me?
Hear me?
I hear you a little bit. Nope, you keep on going out.
Hear me at all?
You're going in and out, man.
Can you hear me?
I hear you now.
Testing. Can you hear me?
All right.
You got me?
I got you.
Oh. Testing.
I hear you.
You got me?
I hear you.
Okay. All right, we're here. We're here. Yeah, I can hear you.
Right,
we're good.
Yeah,
all right.
All
right, here we go. There we go. Pop-up stream. This is what we get for doing the pop-up stream. We get all these technical difficulties. All right, man. I'm stoked, man. We got winter meetings coming up in just about 3 days here. We got a lot of news and rumors to cover and talk about with this team. A lot of stuff has been dropping surrounding maybe not particularly the New York Mets, but the Mets have been linked to a lot of key players, but also just teams around the league that are making their players available and also fielding offers or getting ready to gear up and field offers for their respective players. And it's huge because a lot of these players that we are hearing about are direct needs of what the Mets need for 2026 and beyond. So it's a very exciting time. And I will let you take over here for just a second while I figure this stuff out in the background.
Yeah, so, according to all the reports, the Mets are getting every free agent and they're making every trade. So we're going to have the best rotation in baseball, the best lineup, the best bullpen, and 2026 World Series champions. I mean, who wants more than that? But yeah, listen, a lot of rumors happened today. And look, it's 48 hours before the winter meetings start. And you're hearing a lot of rumblings about, it seems like the trade market is starting to heat up a lot more than the free agent part of this offseason, especially when it comes to starting pitching, right? We're hearing a lot of talk about the Twins not looking to trade Lopez or Ryan. That was the latest reports. There's so much to talk about. But again, what is real, what is not, that's something that we're going to try to break down. And, there's so much to talk about. Me and Chris just needed to jump on and figure out what the hell is going on because, a lot of this can be crap. A lot of this can be credible. And that's what we're trying to do here. And, we're not really going in order here when it comes to topics. But, the interesting thing was, Joe Ryan, you heard names in a possible trade. You heard Joe Ryan, the Mets are interested in, and the Twins are interested in Jonah Tong. And then you did a video, I did a video, everybody did a video. Everybody started to, put packages together, and Byron Buxton was a part of this. And then today we get that the Twins might not be trading any of their star pitchers. Is that believable or not? Is that something that they're trying to, get a better package because they don't like the packages that the teams are trying to give them for them, and they're just trying to take a step back and maybe scare off some teams that might be, thinking that it's not going to happen or get a better deal? What do you think, Chris?
Well, can you still hear me? Am I good?
Yeah, you sound good to me.
Okay, perfect. You know what? I think that there's a lot of conflicting reports, especially as it pertains to the Minnesota Twins. And I was actually really excited about the report that came out yesterday, only for, I guess, Ken Rosenthal to kind of shatter everyone's dreams. But it's actually interesting because I believe the report that came out yesterday surrounding Joe Ryan, for that matter, was from Jon Heyman. So it's kind of conflicting reports from two major insiders there. I think for the Minnesota Twins, and just thinking from their perspective. And by the way, Mets fans that I've seen on all of my content, whether it's over here on YouTube, whether it's on TikTok or over on X, because I posted the trade proposal. It was a blockbuster, Ryan and Byron Buxton in exchange for Senga, Clifford, Vientos, etc. And there's a resounding consent. There's no consensus, actually. It's like split, right? Some will do it, some would not do it. And Mets fans, I just feel like, and I'm starting to see the picture of what you've been talking about all along, Rob, is that a lot of fans just want to hold on to these prospects, right? Because, and you ask people why, it's just like, oh, well, because Jonah Tong is going to be the next Jacob deGrom, which very well could be the case, but nobody knows. Nobody knows. And so they're throwing out the scouting grades of his fastball. And I'm like, okay, where's the scouting grade of his third pitch? I bet you can't find it. What about his fourth pitch? It's probably non-existent, because it is, right? It's non-existent. And so that's what I like. I kind of went off a little bit on a rant on my X account yesterday talking about that. I'm all for being smart about your prospects, right? I know that Jonah Tonga has a bright future. I'm not saying he's going to be a nobody, especially because he struggled in the tail end of 2025. I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying, when you have a chance to get proven players, Buxton, I know that he's injured a lot. If he DHs, I bet you some of those injuries go away. And with a change of scenery, I bet you he puts up really good offensive numbers. And Joe Ryan, who, okay, a lot of people want to argue that he's not an ace. Would he be an ace in this Mets rotation right now? Yes, he would. Is he going to be an ace in a rotation that's supposed to go out there and get a true number one? Maybe not. He's a solid number two, but the point still stands. He's a frontline starter, whether it's a one or a two, in a lot of rotations around the league, I would argue. Because Joe Ryan, I know that some of the ERA numbers are inflated. Who cares? There's other metrics. He has a really good strikeout rate. He has a 7-pitch mix arsenal, and I have confidence that he can put hitters away when he needs to. So all that to say is that, I know that's a little bit of a rant about the videos that we posted, but all this to say is that I think it's a bad idea for the Twins to hold on to their talent, because they're not going anywhere in that division. But even if that's the case, Rob, and you can just see it on the screen right now, there are so many more options for the New York Mets to pursue. Framber Valdez, I'm sure we're going to talk about him on this stream, right? Mitch Keller, Skubal, the Tigers, recent report, they are listening in on offers for Skubal. How serious are they? Nobody knows, but they're listening on offers. Mackenzie Gore, I know it's going to be, or could be, a rare in-division trade, but he's out there for the taking too, even though he has some of the inflated numbers as well. There's just so many different options they can go down, and so many different routes. I think if Joe Ryan is off the table, and even if Joe Ryan was still on the table, my mind, if you're talking about a trade, Tariq Skubal is 1A, you go and get him clearly. But if he's not on the table, my mind shifts directly to Freddie Peralta. I think he is the next best thing on the market that we know of right now. Unless the Marlins, as we are going to get into that report too, are willing to part ways with some of their pitching. I know you like Sandy, Rob. We will talk about Sandy too. But Edward Cabrera is a name that I would love to have on this team. He's young, electric, years of control left, 2026 and beyond, 4 years of control left. And we've seen him in a Marlins uniform against the New York Mets. And the Mets have been linked to him. Like, we know this past trade deadline, they like the name Edward Cabrera, and so do I. So there's nothing short of options this winter meetings coming up, and also the rest of this offseason in terms of the pitching front. And that's why we're doing this stream right now, because there's a lot to get into, and we don't want to miss out.
Yeah, and going back to the Joe Ryan situation, about a lot of Met fans on Twitter today, they don't want to give up Jonah Tong, and it's like, why? Like, I mean, he barely is developed in his secondary pitch, let alone his tertiary pitch or his fourth pitch. Like, we got to understand something. Even if Jonah Tong figures out his second and third pitch, what is that going to be? July, August? You really want to wait for that? Well, somebody else is filling in, and you might not sign or trade for a starting pitcher because, well, Jonah Tong is coming down the line. This is the reason why you got 3 top pitching prospects, because you know what? One's probably expendable, possibly 2, especially if the Mets make moves like signing a Valdez or signing, a Michael King, or trading for Peralta and all these guys that are available. There's so many options available that one of these guys are expendable. And you know what? Brandon Sproat showed more than Jonah Tong right now. Brandon Sproat's kind of ahead in that game. He's still got work to do, but I could see Brandon Sproat starting as a number 5 starter during the season. I don't see Jonah Tong being a starter at least until after the deadline, and that's an if. That's if he develops into it, develops those pitchers. So for Met fans, and it sucks to confirm what I've been saying, but it's a fact. Like, it's not even about prospect huggers anymore. It's just the fact that people are so desperate for homegrown talent that they would rather lose with homegrown talent than win with less homegrown talent. Like, we shouldn't care about how we win. If it's a bunch of guys we sign and trade for who are no homegrown talent, nobody's going to be less happy if we win a championship. I can assure you that. But their mindset is so blown out of the water and just doesn't make sense. The mindset needs to be about winning, not about how your emotions feel about a certain player. Players come, players go. That's it. You always root for the name on the chest, not the name on the back. Haven't we figured that out by now, Chris?
Well, apparently not. Apparently not. And so I think that you've been preaching this for the longest time. And you know what? Last off season, I was a little bit skeptical because I was just like, okay, there are definitely some untouchables, right, in this organization. Really, the only guy that you can make the case for that, he's untouchable and you cannot trade him for anybody is Nolan McLean right now, right? If Tariq Skubal is right, can be right in your organization, the Tigers like, this deal will happen if you give us Carson Bench. I love Carson Bench. I think he's going to be great. You make that deal, no doubt about it.
And you have to sign Bellinger.
Yeah, right, correct. And there's flexibility in doing that, right? And and that's the point here, is that there's a lot of flexibility. My thing is this: Mets fans. And I understand, like, I appreciate the debate, right? I'm not gonna just, belittle Mets fans that want to trade or don't want to trade prospects. It's not what we're here to do. We're here to have a healthy discussion and conversation about this because it's both sides of the coin, right? I understand that prospects can materialize and they're also needed to backfill certain spots, right? I'm sure we're gonna see that in 2026. But a guy like Jonah Tong, who is going to be a great pitcher, like I said, I've been very high on Jonah Tong. I won't backtrack on that. But it's very clear that he struggled with the put-away pitches and the put-away stuff and the 5 starts that we saw him in 2025 at the tail end. And you're telling me that it's going to take one off season and the months in between to develop a competent 3rd and 4th put-away pitch? I think that's egregious. There's no chance. And so the patience that us Mets fans have to have with these prospects developing, I don't think that the Mets are on the trajectory or the timeline if they are able to get proven talent this offseason to wait, like you said, 6, 7, 8 months for these guys to finally start to put things together and show their potential. How long did it take Brett Beatty to finally come to form? And that's an extreme example because that's like 3 years of a guy that's supposed to be a top prospect that finally put things together in 2025. And I'm not saying it's going to take all these prospects that long, but they're not going to be immediate contributors right away to the degree that Nolan McLean was. Yep. It's just unrealistic to expect that from them. And so I do think it's time for the Mets, David Stearns in this front office, to prioritize proven talent, especially with where they're at with this roster. Marcus Semien, Lindor, your up the middle tandem is not getting any younger, right? Juan Soto's about to be 27 years old. You still have a window with him. He's not getting any younger even still too. So it is what it is. The Mets are in a win now situation. And so I understand wanting prospects and seeing them materialize, being homegrown, but at some point, like, we have to understand that scared money doesn't make any money. And I've said this time and time again. And I think that some Mets fans in this fan base are scared. I really do.
Well, you know what, Chris? This organization needs to grow some balls. They really do. Like seriously, it's a stupid thing. It's a messed up thing to say, but it's true, right? This has been an organization of hesitancy, right? You want to go back to Ken Griffey Jr. You want to go back to, Alex Rodriguez. You want to go back to whatever trade or free agent signings that they could have made, but they were hesitant to do so, and they shied away from it. It goes back to Steve Phillips, Sandy Alderson, the 100 GMs that we had since. Like, it goes back further than that. Like, we have to stop being so hesitant and make a move, make a big boy move. All right, we still haven't done that, right? Devin Williams was a smart sign-in, but you know what? That's not a stepping up and showing how big you are. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not. They didn't do anything. This is nothing. This is okay. This was a backup plan if things go sour. That's basically what it is. But it can be the smartest move of the offseason if you sign Edwin Diaz. So they just need to be a little bit more adamant and be defiant on what they do. That's all. That's all they have to do. Like there's so many different roads. You just talked about it. There's so many different pathways of having a good off season, right? You can put a combination of players together. A off season. Another combination. A off season. It wasn't like last year where it was kind of a hit or miss. There wasn't much. There's a lot of pathways this year, trade wise and free agent wise. You can do a combination of both and have a good off season. It doesn't matter. We're all going to have our opinions on what we think is better, what pathway is better, but a lot of these pathways are pretty damn good. And this is where we need to see David Stearns finally show something, right? I don't want to go into this offseason having all these prospects still here. Why? Where are these guys playing? You got Simeon for 3 years. You have about 14 prospect first, second basemen that couldn't even play last year because they were blocked. You got all potential from Ryan Clifford and Carson Benj and Jet Williams. Like, there's too many guys for this roster. You got to start using these guys as assets because the longer you hold them, the longer, the quicker they lose value. And that's ultimately going to hurt you. And this is where they need to make a decision here. And you know what? If Tarik Skubal, if that report is correct, Chris, Tarik Skubal better be a New York Met. I said that from the beginning. If this guy is available and the Tigers are listening, which the reports say they are, the Mets better be number one on that list on whatever they need to give up to get Tarik Skubal. If it's Jonah Tong, wonderful. If it's Benj, wonderful. You know why? Because you shouldn't care about 2027. You shouldn't care about 2028 or 2029. Worry about 2026. Tarik Skubal, the best pitcher in baseball, will be on your team, leading your rotation for 2026. If Steve Cohen, who is the richest owner in baseball, is not going to let Tarik Skubal go somewhere else. Now, obviously, there's always a risk because Skubal might not like New York. He might not have the best season, and he might just say, screw this, I don't want to be here. But that opportunity is here. There's no reason why the Mets can't extend him. I know it's Boris, but there's no reason why Steve Cohen can't throw a $400 million check at his foot on the table and says, hey, we want to sign you. We're serious about this. So there's too many options for him to fuck this up. And if he fucks this up, he should be on the hot seat. Honestly, this is the offseason where me and you, Chris, can figure out a pathway and have a good offseason. If he can't do that, then you really got to question his ability to obtain talent on this team. And don't give me these prospects, because if you wanted to do these prospects, you could have done it in 2024 when we talked about trading, or, in 2023 when we should have traded Alonso and we should have traded other guys, and they held off, not did it. And they went into 2024 getting 1 year type of prove it deals so they can trade him at the deadline. And what did they do? Right? They kind of messed up their whole transition period of what they were trying to do to acquire more assets. That was the time to do what you needed to do with these prospects. You didn't do that. That is on you. And 2024, the same thing. So, it got very interesting because they started to win, right? I can't really fault Stearns on that aspect of it, but you got to make a decision here, right? Either don't sign Alonso, don't sign Diaz. You know what? If you care about these prospects so much, Dylan Ross, be the closer. You know what? Ryan Clifford, be the first baseman. Because if you're going to care about these prospects so much, then start them on day one. And then I don't want to hear nobody complaining when this team doesn't do well. Get the talent in here. It's really that simple.
I agree. And like you said, David Stearns, I defended David Stearns all day long, every single day. You did not last offseason. You were like half bought in. I was fully bought into David Stearns. But with what I saw transpire in 2025, listen, I'm not going to say that I don't believe in the guy, because I do. I want him to succeed. I want him to be here for the long haul. I want to believe in this plan that he has in place. But there is a time. The time is now that names are presenting themselves and will present themselves. You have to go out there and show us that you are cut out to build a New York roster from the ground up, which is what he inherited, and make them into a championship caliber team. Because I think 2024, you probably agree, was a fluke. It was a fluke. They were not on the same timeline. It's kind of like the New York Giants in 2022 when they miraculously made the playoffs and won a playoff game under the first year of Joe Shane and Brian Daboll. It's the same concept with the Mets and David Stearns in 2024. Literally same thing. And it's a shame because then Mets fans' expectations were sky high, and then the lowest of the lows hit when we didn't even make the playoffs in 2025. So I'll give him some leeway there and some grace because, yeah, we were not supposed to be in that position in 2024. 2025, I get it. There's a step back. I didn't expect it to be that much of a step back, but it was. Now is the time to be like, you got Juan Soto. You made that investment. You need to go out there and put a competent roster together. So let's get into some of these names in particular. Where do you want to start? I think it's very important because we both have agreed that the number one priority should be Edwin Diaz. And there are a lot of reports surrounding Edwin Diaz right now that the New York Mets and Edwin Diaz are not close on a deal. We all know that Will Salmon and everybody, all the insiders are saying that Devin Williams signing is not taking them out on the sweepstakes of Edwin Diaz, right? We know that. But Diaz wants 5 years. At the very minimum, he wants 4. Now, I think the Mets will go 4 for him, but their ideal price point in terms of years is 3. How do you bridge that gap? That's what the negotiations are right now.
So the good sign here is that I don't think the Dodgers want to go 5 years either. Because wouldn't he have signed already?
Correct.
Right? I mean, you just assume that. So I'm thinking, I don't think the Dodgers, I know they don't care about money too much, but are they going to really have another high-paid reliever with Scott, Yates, and Diaz, getting a ton of money just for the bullpen? I don't think they're going to cry to their mommy about their payroll because it's already enormous. But I don't think the Dodgers want to go 5 years either. And that's why you keep on hearing that, I know Evan Roberts is probably not credible, but it was weird that he said that to start his show today. And that kind of blew up my phone today in regards to, again.
But did you see, I think it was Laura Albanese.
She kind of blew it up.
Debunked that.
Yeah.
Basically.
But again, who the hell knows? Like, I don't know, again, she's a good reporter. She isn't like a newsbreaker or she isn't like a reporter that like reports this type of news and trades and
but she doesn't go out on limbs and is not incorrect all the time either. Like these
but
she
gives her opinion on Baseball Night in New York. But like she is not the one to start tweeting saying, oh well, I heard the Mets are doing or listening or looking at this guy or that guy. She doesn't do that. So for her to step up like that, I don't know if she heard something different or I don't know. Like I'm not putting her down or anything like that because she could be absolutely right.
Well, she said it's a source, and I do believe she has sources, probably more so than Evan Roberts. I'll go on that limb.
I think so, yeah. But it was just weird that Evan Roberts just came out like that, like nonchalant in the start of his show.
You know what? To be fair to Evan Roberts, right? I don't listen to these radio guys. I think it's really, really well documented. You're more in tune with those guys than I am. I'm not gonna lie, I haven't listened to a lick of their stuff. Like I don't listen to them.
So Evan's not the type of guy to just throw shit out there. Like he's not Sal Licata, who is, saying, no, the NL East is over. Craig Carton is not going to take my spot, and yet he did. Stuff like that. Like he goes out there on the limb on a lot of things, and he says industry sources a lot. But Evan Robert never does that. Like he'll talk about other people spreading rumors and talking and reporting stuff. He never would just say it like that personally from him hearing something. So that's why it was weird.
Well, you know what? To come to not to his defense by any means, like I said, like I trust these reporters like Laura, like Will Salmon, the people who generally, and like you said, right? Laura doesn't really break that type of news. So for her to go out there and concretely say per source that is completely wrong, that should give you an indication. But I will say, just to piggyback off of the Devin Williams presser that we saw today live at 3:30, which was only 15 minutes long, it seemed a little like lack of energy to me, right? There was only a handful of questions. It seemed a little bit lacking of energy, and that's fine. And you still have to love the signing regardless of the answers in the press conference. Like that's besides the point. But like, I just get a feeling. This is a gut feeling. There's no sources. I'm not going to attach any sources or I'm hearing. This is like voices in my head or something like that. Like it's a gut feeling that I think especially when Devin Williams said that getting better arms and the best amount of arms as possible into a bullpen is the best bet to win, right? That just leads me to believe that the conversation that he had with Stearns and the Mets brass when he signed, because he had 5 other offers, Rob, and he stated
And most were
basically
close.
all of those offers were for him to close ball games elsewhere, and he chose the Mets under this gray area that he might be setting up another guy, whether it's Suarez, Diaz, etc. So for him to say that he understands that the more good premier arms, the better, leads me to believe that, yeah, the Mets are going to get this done with Diaz. But there's nothing concrete out there. And until I hear otherwise from an actual credible, I get it. Like, he doesn't go out there and do that, like you said. I don't know his style. I can't buy into it, man. Not at this point.
Yeah, it is. It's really like, yeah, it was kind of like there was no like kind of like big emotion there that you got excited about. But he was adamant about, he wanted to come to the Mets. Like, he had closer positions, closer spots available that teams were offering him. And why didn't he go there? Like, the David Stearns, at the very least, and everybody knows I'm not a fan of him, he seems like he tells people how it is and what they're trying to do. Same thing with Clay Holmes last year to become a starter. Like, not many people were talking about it, but the Mets thought he can go into that, be a starter. I think the same thing here with Devin Williams. I think they were very honest with him. And we all talk about how many times the players talk about they want the organization to be honest with them. Even Nimmo, who kind of bashed this whole team, he even said, in that the Mets were honest with him when it came to the trade situation, right? They didn't like try to, leave anything out. They kind of told him what it was. And I think players respect that. And I think Stearns was like, listen, yeah, we're still trying to go for Edwin Diaz here. And, we're not against you being a closer, but you know what? We liked you, what we saw being a setup guy. And if we happen to not get Diaz and you might be the guy, we trust you in being a closer as well. So I think that honest atmosphere that Stearns seems to bring, I think resonates with a lot of the players. And that's why I think he chose the Mets. Like, I think he could have got more than 3 years, $45 million or close to $50 million. I think he probably could have got a 3-year deal, a little bit more money to be a closer. Like, I really think he could have. But listen, I think he was pissed off because I don't think the Yankees kind of rubbed him the wrong way the day one from spring training with the whole beard thing. And then, so I think that was an issue as well.
Think about this for a second. And I'm just thinking about this and how crazy this is right now. Like, these guys use each other in position groups, right? The position group players that are free agents, they're always trying to sign after the guy that got the big deal, right? Somebody goes first and sets the market, and then the others wait. And usually it's the guy that's the most sought after, I would think, signs early, right? To set the market, because he's going to get his money regardless. I'm surprised. Like, it has to be eye-opening that Devin Williams signed this early, before Edwin Diaz, before Robert Suarez, because whatever they got, right? He could have just used that to say, read the room. Who else is here with me? You're not going to get another better option. Diaz is back with the Mets, or Diaz is with the Blue Jays. Suarez is wherever he is. I'm your next best option. And the gap between me and the next best option after me is very large. So the fact that he actually signed this early and wanted to come to this organization tells me that, one, he wanted to be a New York Met all along because of that familiarity with David Stearns. That's first off. And second of all, it tells me that the New York Mets, who are still actively negotiating with an elite closer, knew that they wanted to get the signing out of the way, and they're going to do everything in their power to bring back their guy in Edwin Diaz. Yeah. Gut feeling. But like, just how early Devin Williams signed was an indication to me alone. Like, he could have waited out the market and used the lack of other options as leverage for all these other teams.
Look, Stearns is being aggressive at the moment, right? We talked about him not being aggressive and letting the market dictate what he does, and he's not doing it this year, at least up to this point, right? The Nimmo trade was kind of he was according to what Nimmo said, that the reports were that the Twins, or sorry, the Rangers asked about Nimmo and called about Nimmo, and then it started to develop, to materialize into a trade. And Stearns didn't wait, right? He talked to Nimmo, gave him a few days to talk about it with his family, and it went through. And then the Devin Williams trade came out of nowhere. There wasn't a lot of rumors about the Mets being in on Devin Williams. There was like a little hint of them being interested, but nothing that serious. And it just happened like that. So, so far David Stearns is doing what I've wanted him to do for 2 years now. And he's doing it right now, being aggressive, but he can't take that foot off the pedal. He just cannot do that right now. You have to be aggressive because, again, these trades can happen. You can't have a Garrett Crochet situation happen again. You can't have Max Fried or Corbin Burns, get off the table because you were not willing to give out money. I know Corbin Burns got hurt, but he wasn't hurt at the moment. And Max Fried had a really good season. So it is going to be interesting what's going to happen in particular with Diaz. But I think it's a really good sign that he didn't sign with the Dodgers yet, because the 5th year, I think, is a pipe dream, to be quite honest with you. I know the Mets are not going to do that. Maybe the Dodgers will budge on a 5th year. They could, if they're a little worried about losing him. But again, they could just sign Suarez. I don't think they're too worried about that, to be quite honest with you. I just think they just want another guy that they can trust in their bullpen. So I'm going to see. I just really want to see if the Mets are serious about that 4th year, because the 3rd year is obvious. They would love to do 3 years, and they don't care how much money. It could be close to $30 million. They don't care. They care about the years, which, is kind of nitpicking, but I understand the logic when it comes to especially bullpen arms. Even though Diaz is the best closer in baseball, 3 years from now, he might lose a couple miles an hour off his fastball, and we know how his fastball plays with his slider. So that's what you always have to worry about. And David Stearns is smart about that. But you can't be that smart and be smarter than everybody else and lose Diaz to the team like the Dodgers. You just can't do that, especially if it's the 4th year. Because if the Dodgers sign him on for a 4-year deal and the Mets weren't willing to do that, that's a bad job by David Stearns. The 5th year, I kind of get, even though I would still do it and risk it. The 4th year would really piss me off.
I will say this. I'll probably go against that and say that I think the biggest threat to sign Diaz to a 5-year deal just out of desperation, because they gave a desperate deal out to Dylan Cease, is the Toronto Blue Jays. Okay. I think the Toronto Blue Jays would do it over the Dodgers. Well, I think
have we found was there a lot of information on the Blue Jays, though? I know they're kind of interested, but we haven't.
Heyman said that he sees the biggest threat being the Blue Jays to the Mets. And there's actually a lot of Dodgers beat reporters. I think Katie Wu is the reporter's name. I think that's who I saw it from. That is directly a Dodgers beat writer. Said that the Dodgers it's very unlikely that they're going to be after Edwin Diaz given the asking price. So I think right now, with what we've been hearing, is between the Blue Jays and the Mets. And that's also coming from John Heyman directly.
It's interesting, though, because it seemed like the Dodgers were like a heavy favorite. Like they were willing to just pay anything. But I mean, the Blue Jays are desperate, like you said. Like they gave a crazy deal to Cease.
But think about this, too, is that even from the Mets' perspective, if they lose out on Edwin Diaz to the Blue Jays, if the 4th year or 5th year is the thing that really is the sticking point to that, Robert Suarez, by nature, who's already 34 years old in comparison to Edwin Diaz's 32, is probably only in line for a 3-year deal anyways. And so if you're giving Edwin Diaz 5 years, that pays him through age 37. Robert Suarez on a 3-year deal pays him through the same age 37. Correct. Now, I will say this. It's basically kind of the same thing. Now, I will say this. The peak of both of these guys' games, I'm still taking Edwin Diaz over Robert Suarez. I think the numbers definitely show that, but Robert Suarez is nothing to joke about. I mean, this guy's a back-to-back all-star. He's got the electricity, right, with the fastball as well. Like, he's posted some really good numbers. I think it would just piss Mets fans off because Edwin Diaz has been doing the job, especially with that 2022 and 2025 campaign, and we've just come to know and love Sugar Diaz. And I think it's the same thing with Pete Alonso. Losing out on these guys that are your guys and leaving in free agency just leaves a sour taste in fans' mouths. But I'm like, if the Mets pivot to Robert Suarez, Devin Williams and Robert Suarez, all the same. Like, let's ride. That's a good back into the bullpen.
Yeah, when it comes to some Met, I talked about it on Mets Talk Live, just in general that the same concept with Pete Alonso. Even though I think Edwin Diaz to this team is more important than Pete Alonso, because I think you can find a big bat. It's very hard to find an elite closer, and that has been obvious. Just watch baseball in general. But I've said this for a while. The Mets can still win without Diaz, the same way I talk about the Mets can still win without Pete Alonso. Because again, you just brought it up, and I said it on the Mets Talk Live the other day that Suarez is a step below Diaz, but you can do a lot worse of those 40 saves that he got last year than Diaz. It's not that much of a downgrade. It is a downgrade, but obviously you got to worry about can he pitch in New York and all that other stuff. Diaz can do it, but you don't know that until you try. You can't be afraid to sign somebody because they might not, perform well in New York. You just don't know that. Like, you can't predict that at all. So that argument is stupid. I understand the argument and the logic, but you can't predict that. You just have to go with the flow and hope for the best. So if the Mets lose out on Diaz and sign Robert Suarez, you probably still got one of the better 1-2s in the back end of the bullpen in baseball. Like, that's a fact.
I wouldn't be crying at all. I wouldn't be crying.
No, I would be upset because I want Diaz because you know what he is. But the way how Met fans are gonna act. I mean, they're already bitching and moaning about Jonah Tong, who's not even a major leaguer. They would cry to the heavens. Oh my God, we're gonna lose Nimmo, Edwin Diaz, and Pete Alonso this offseason. Oh my God, we can never win because we've won so much in the last 40 years that everybody's gonna cry. And the pathway to winning a World Series isn't based on Diaz only or Pete Alonso only. Those guys can be replaced. Now, you might not be happy with the names, but if the Mets sign Kyle Schwarber and Cody Bellinger, let's just go crazy here. All right, if they sign Cody Bellinger and Kyle Schwarber, that is like 60 home runs right there. You automatically get that production that you got from Pete Alonso, one player, and you formed it into two players stretching out your lineup. Don't tell me you can't win with that, because you can. Same thing goes for Diaz. If you can't sign Diaz and you get Suarez, you got a 40-save guy in Suarez. Let's say he's pretty good. And you still got Devin Williams, who was one of the best closers in baseball 2 years ago, as your setup guy. And the Mets already have a solid bullpen with Minter and Raley, and they're going to add. So there's pathways to winning, not just this tunnel vision that Met fans seem to have with certain players.
I would hope Mets fans realize that if you are presented two options, one, keep Pete Alonso, or two, you have the ability to sign both Schwarber and Bellinger. I know that there's Mets fans that will say, I'm still taking Pete Alonso, but those are like homers. Those are like the homer fans that root for players instead of the overall team. There's under no circumstance objectively that I would ever take Pete Alonso over Bellinger and Schwarber if you can do that and if you can swing that with the money. There's just no way.
Yeah.
I'm taking Schwarber and Bellinger all day long. I might even take Schwarber over Pete Alonso as it is if the Mets can sell me on a pivot point to first base, because how long have I been talking about Schwarber, Rob? Like, how long have I been doing that? I want Schwarber. I want him very badly. Should we shift over to Schwarber? I think we should.
Yeah,
that's
sure,
a perfect segue. Let's
fun.
do that.
We're about it today, so let's go.
So Schwarber is a guy that is fielding interest, and his market is probably the biggest market or the fastest growing market of any of the major bats. Heyman, Passan, all these guys are saying that he is going to be the one that signs first. It's not going to be Tucker. It's not going to be Pete. Those guys are going to wait until Schwarber gets his money, because the market is established.
Yep.
And teams know they want a guy that has put 40-plus home runs over the fence, 45-plus home runs over the fence in 3 of his past 4 years. That's what teams want. I would want that too, especially for a New York Mets team that has not had a solidified DH ever since they got introduced into the National League. right? We've been doing this platoon garbage. And if you've followed me on my channel and subscribed for long enough, you know that I hate the platoon. And I don't want any more platoons in the DH. Give me a guy that you can slot in there and make the positional battle work at first base, no matter who's there. That's what I want. And so the Reds are going to be in on it. Rosenthal has been talking about, and Morosi also has been talking about the Reds, hometown to Kyle Schwarber, who's from there, really want to make that work because they're an up-and-coming team as well. And if they get one more bat and have some pitching help, they can do some damage in that NL Central. And then the Phillies, of course, they're the front runners to sign and retain Schwarber. And they, he has that kind of, they have the edge because he's been there and he knows the lay of the land of Philly, playing there, what the team is all about, what their plans are. But at the end of the day, if the New York Mets can also just be like this pest to the Phillies and drive the price up, that would be immaculate. If you told anybody, let alone the Phillies, that the Mets were seriously going to entertain Kyle Schwarber this offseason when they have their own issues with Pete Alonso and trying to re-sign him, I bet you they never believed in that. But now you have the New York Mets who are lurking, and they want Kyle Schwarber. This is not just from John Heyman and Morosi and Rosenthal, by the way. Jeff Passan has linked the Mets to Kyle Schwarber on numerous occasions. And if there's one name that I will always trust as it comes to any MLB news, it's Jeff Passan. So, yeah, this is a real thing, Rob. This is a real thing. I'm not sure how Kyle Schwarber views New York. I think that's been a big sticking point of a lot of fans saying, well, he'll never come to New York because he doesn't like New York. I'm not sure I've ever heard Kyle Schwarber say that. Could I believe it if that was true? Yeah, maybe. But I've never heard him say that. So until that actually gets said by him directly from his mouth, then I'm under the assumption that the Mets, this is fair game. And at the least, you drive up the asking price for Kyle Schwarber, which makes the Phillies pay more.
Yeah, he's going to the highest bidder. Just like Pete Alonso, probably Edwin Diaz. That's what's going to happen. Like favorite or not, he can easily go to his hometown team and take a little bit of a discount, right? But he's not going to do that. If the Reds don't pay him the most money, he ain't going there. Same thing with the Phillies, same thing with the Mets. And you just said it. If the Mets just drive up the price for the Phillies because they're desperate not to lose him, then it's a win because it probably limits the Phillies to do something else. Because they already talked about that. They're trying to, possibly trade Nick Castellanos just to, shed some payroll to add something else. And they also lost JT Realmuto. That's, Schwarber and Realmuto were leaders on that team. That is something that you also have to look at that as well. And, I know people are talking about, I think somebody said Schwarber is not a better fit than Pete Alonso. I kind of think he is, to be quite honest with you. I think, how many more times are you going to keep losing with Pete Alonso? And, for all the Met fans that want to continue to give Pete Alonso credit when things go well for the New York Mets, you got to give him blame too when the things go wrong. It's not all his fault, but it seems like everybody, they can't wait to blame Lindor. They can't wait to blame Juan Soto or this guy and that guy. But Pete Alonso is off limits. It's a joke. All right. The losing has been a part of this core since 2018. Since Nimmo and McNeil were on this team, and then Pete Alonso came the year after, this has been a losing franchise. They're a part of it. They're the faces of this franchise. They're the problem, or at least part of the problem. They're part of this losing. Don't throw them out of it and only give them credit when things go well. It's stupid. It's stupid. Pete Alonso had a great year this year. How did that work for the 83 Mets win team? Right? When Lindor was throwing up big numbers and MVP type numbers, the Mets actually won more ball games. There's a comparison here. I said this on Mets Talk Live. When Lindor plays well and his numbers are great and MVP caliber, the Mets win more ball games. When Pete Alonso goes crazy, the Mets don't win. So just think about that for a second, right? There's no logical explanation for it, but those are the facts. They're right there in front of you. Just look it up. So listen, if you think that Bellinger-Schwarber combination is, you rather not have that and just have Pete Alonso, whatever you're smoking, give it to me. Because I just don't understand the logic. You can get 60 home runs, and that's down year home run wise. I'm not talking about the 50 plus home runs that Schwarber hit. He can hit 40 14, 15 home runs less, and Bellinger can hit 20. Yeah, that might be a downgrade from what they did the year prior, but that's 60 home runs added to your lineup that Pete Alonso, and oh, by the way, did he hit 40 the last 2 seasons? No, right? That's 20 plus home runs you're adding to your lineup with Soto, Lindor, and who knows if Alvarez bounces back, but let's say even 15, 20 home runs from Brett Beatty, Alvarez, 15 home runs. Like that adds up. Like, don't tell me that lineup is not better. Because what have we seen with a Pete Alonso lineup? We I'm not saying don't get Pete Alonso, but you're crazy to think that, let's get Pete Alonso, because I think me and Chris agree with this. If you sign Pete Alonso, it's probably going to be a 5-year deal. I don't think he's going to take less than that. He'll go elsewhere.
The Red Sox will give him a 5-year deal at that,
absolutely.
too.
So. If you sign Pete Alonso, you're probably not getting Bellinger. You're probably not getting Schwarber. You might get, a Luis Robert that you trade for center field. That is. Would you rather have Schwarber, Bellinger, or Alonso and Robert? I mean, come on, it's a no-brainer. It really is.
I agree with you. I think I'm inclined to agree with you here. And that is just with the way. So under that assumption, just to get this out the way too, because like I said, if Pete Alonso walks, a lot of Mets fans are asking, what is the first base move for the Mets? Because that's a valid sure. question too. That's okay. A valid question.
Again, if Pete Alonso's not on his team, I think Bellinger will be. So he can be your first baseman. You trade for a center fielder, and problem solved. You can use Carson Bench as the opportunity to win left field. There's nothing wrong with that. Or center field and put Bellinger in left, whatever you might have to do, or Okamoto.
I just think that with what, I think I'm a little bit more of a Pete Alonso supporter than you are. I think I'll just say that. We know the differences of what we talked about Pete Alonso, but I hear you because you're not wrong in some of the statements that you're saying. I still think Pete Alonso is probably not all to blame for the lack of, Mets. And I'm not saying that you're saying that either, by the way. Yeah. But I agree, and I also agree with Pat in the chat here saying signing Pete means we're basically running back last year's roster.
Exactly.
That's the point too, because David Stearns, his first move was to offload Brandon Nimmo. Like, that's a huge core shakeup. And I'm inclined to believe that he's not going to stop there. So that also probably leaves the door open for Pete Alonso walking if he's not willing to accept the Mets' terms. And that's okay because, again, there's other pivot points as well for the New York Mets. Although I really would like to see Pete Alonso back. Bellinger at first base, he can do it. I don't.
He's a better first baseman defensively than Pete Alonso.
Sure, I can buy into that, but you know what though? If you go ahead and go the Bellinger route, I don't know if you get Bellinger and Schwarber though. Now I'm starting to think about it though. I mean, you're talking about a 5-year deal for both of those guys, probably. I don't think either. Maybe if you could entice Schwarber on a 4-year deal, but like I said, are the Mets really favorites to land Schwarber as it is? So if you're talking about Luis Robert, if that's a serious consideration for an offensive upgrade, and then either one of Bellinger and Pete, it's basically you're asking me who I'd rather have, Bellinger or Pete Alonso. I still have to take Pete Alonso.
Sure, of course, because of the offensive production for sure. I'm not naive to say that it's Bellinger over Alonso. That's a stupid conversation. But we're talking about how can we maximize our bats this offseason of what we acquire via trade or free agency, right? I think because I think the fact that Pete Alonso could get a 5th year closer to $180 million, I feel like that might take you out of another potential position player only because of the fact that I think Pete Alonso kind of locks you in to a position of first base, and you might have to platoon him more with DH. At least with the Schwarber situation, he's going to be the DH. Bellinger is going to be either a left field, center field, or first base. So you can maneuver around that. You sign Pete Alonso, your first base and DH your DH situation is going to be a platoon because you don't. Stearns already said it. He doesn't want Pete Alonso to play first base every day. So that means that DH spot's going to get taken up by Pete Alonso sometimes or more often than not. You can't sign Schwarber and just DH him like that. that run prevention nonsense goes out the window at that point. I mean, that would be pretty cool, but it doesn't fit the way you think it all should, because only people look at the lineup and you're not listening to what David Stearns is talking about. David Stearns thinks this lineup's going to hit no matter who he brings in here, no matter what the lineup looks like. He thinks they're going to hit. He keeps on talking about run prevention. He talked about in the Simeon conversation, right? He said it. He goes, yeah, I don't think Simeon's the same offensive player he was a couple of years ago, but you know what? I know he's a Gold Glove defender, and we'll see what we can get. Anything with the bat is a plus. So he's telling you right there that if the Mets prevent more runs, because the Mets weren't terrible offensively. They were in the middle of the pack. At the end of the year, they ended up being in the middle of the pack. They were terrible early on, but they ended up being in the middle of the pack offensively. If you prevented some more runs, and that obviously involves a lot more pitching, better pitching as well, but our defense was atrocious last year. It was bad all around, from even the star players. So if you can get your run prevention better, there's a pretty good chance you can win more games. And it's not about my opinion. It's what David Stearns keeps on saying. Every time he speaks, he talks about run prevention. And Bellinger prevents more runs than Pete Alonso. And it's just what the numbers saying, what David Stearns is talking about. You have to listen to what he's talking about and how he's going along with this offseason so far.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And, with the whole DH situation around Pete Alonso, I've always been skeptical that it's going to happen in 2026, because I think those conversations were surrounding like 2027 and beyond, somewhere along the lines of his, long-term contract that he's supposedly getting. So I don't know. It remains to be seen. I mean, again, we're talking about these combinations. I'm happy with all these combinations. Like, I'll take Bellinger, I'll take Schwarber, I'll take Pete Alonso back. That's fine with me. But it's not about which main bat you bring back, because I think you get one of those. But who is the other offensive upgrade? And that's what this super chat right here on your account is talking about, right? Mets had the best offensive tree in MLB last year. What's wrong with running back Pete, Soto, and Lindor if you changed a lot of the other pieces? How many other pieces can you change around them? You're talking about bringing in a Robert Jr. or maybe some other bat that we're not talking about right now that hasn't been reported, and that's basically it. Like, these are big financial commitments between Schwarber, Bellinger, and Pete. So you have to choose wisely between these names. Correct. It's not like you don't have much flexibility once you make that decision. Correct. So,
but Pete Alonso makes for less of a flexibility factor for what you do, because now you're talking about a subpar offensive player, most likely in center field or left field, and that's the problem, and that is where David Stearns kind of has a problem with this, and I think that he knows that if he can get Pete Alonso on a 3-year deal, maybe 4 with an opt-out, or just 4 years, I think he can maneuver another big bat on the market, even if it might be a trade that we're not thinking of.
Okay, let's do this. Okay. Let's do this. Based off of what you just said in the last few words, Mets get Pete Alonso, right? Or let's say Mets get Bellinger, right? Instead, let's say Mets get Bellinger, and they trade, because this has been circulated that I've seen, but nothing credible. But we know that this player could be on the trade block from his respective team. Wilson Contreras, who just shifted over to first base. He's carrying about $18 million on his contract. Let's look at this Wilson Contreras. This is not where I want to go, but I can see David Stearns doing this. As much as it pains me. Let's see here. I think this is a realistic possibility, Rob. Wilson Contreras, ready? He has 2026, 2027, and a club option for 2028. So it's basically 2 years that you have to be locked into him. At $18 million in 2026, and 2027 is $18.5 million. Now let's take a look at Wilson Contreras' defensive numbers at first base, because he, like I said, with the injury concerns, he shifted over in St. Louis to first base. Let's look at Fangraphs here. I always go to Fangraphs for the defensive metrics, because we're talking about run prevention here at the end of the day, right? This is what our Pobo is talking about, run prevention. Let's take a look at this. Let's see here. Game log. All right, I'm on the wrong thing. Here, let me pull this up. You can talk for now. Let me pull this up because I think Wilson Contreras, I don't know why, gut feeling. It's just like if you're going the trade route, because like I said, if Pete Alonso's not a New York Met, yes, you can have Cody Bellinger play first base. Is he going to do so on an everyday basis? That's where I have concerns. And Ryan Clifford's not going to be ready in 2026. So there would have to be a lateral movement. In an ideal scenario, you go out there and you sign a guy like Okamoto, who's going to also be a very big financial commitment. And there's been no reports. Maybe that's even to the advantage of the Mets who want to keep things in-house, but I've seen nothing about the Mets being linked or even interested in Okamoto. So that's where I'm bringing up this Wilson Contreras topic. Hold on 1 second. Give me like 5 seconds to bring this up.
Yeah. So the Wilson Contreras thing. Again, you're gonna bring up the defensive metrics and all that stuff. I think that's kind of the issue. Like he's not gonna provide similar to better offensive numbers than Pete Alonso, and he's probably not going to provide that much better defense, if at all. So I don't know if that would be a move to do unless you bring in a Schwarber or a Bellinger to kind of counteract that. So, until you give out the metrics, it's kind of like, one's got to be, obviously the offense is not better than Pete Alonso. His defense got to be elite. And if it's not elite, then I think it's kind of a wash at that point because Pete Alonso is the better player. I mean, if I had to choose between one, I'd rather go the Pete Alonso route. But it's tough because I don't know. I think that when it comes to run prevention, it's just what David Stearns keeps preaching every time he has a microphone in front of him. So it's kind of tough to know that we're looking at potential offensive numbers that can be replaced and better this lineup and stretch out the lineup a little bit more, extend this lineup a little bit more than what it was last year. It seemed like 1 through 4 wasn't the issue. It was 5 through 9. And it kind of, was a problem because no matter what the numbers were from the 1 through 4, the 5 through 9 was impossible to deal with because they were so terrible. So I think stretching out this lineup is important. And, that's why I still believe the Mets need 2 bats in here. Unfortunately, they also need 2 top line starting pitchers as well because David Stearns put them in this situation. You got the numbers?
Yes. They're better than Pete Alonso's, might I add. He played a lot of first base. Over 1,000 innings at first base in 2025 for the Cardinals, right? He had previous experience in first base or at first base in the Chicago Cubs days, but this was his first season that he really played first base for the Cardinals on almost an everyday basis, right? DRS numbers, -1. You want to know what Pete Alonso's is? Let me bring up Pete Alonso's, actually. His outs above average is really good, like top tier. Pete Alonso, Fangraphs. And this should be a actually eye-opening stat defensively about how Pete Alonso is not the defender that we all think he is, right? Or that I know that he's not.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
Wilson Contreras is outperforming him. That's a problem. So let's take a look at this real quick. If I can pull it up here in a timely manner. Advanced, let me go here. So defensive run saved. Not to hijack this conversation surrounding this, because I know we got a little bit of time here. 2025, defensive run saved, -9 for Pete Alonso, -1 for Wilson Contreras. By the way, you want to be as close to 0. You want to be in the positive numbers, but if you're in the negatives, you want to be as close to 0 as possible. So Pete Alonso, -9, Wilson Contreras, -1. Outs above average for Pete Alonso. Oh, this is pitiful. That's just pitiful. -9 outs above average to Wilson Contreras's 6. +6. +6.
That's crazy. That's a big number.
It's a big jump, man. And so I'm like 1 year sample size for Wilson Contreras. Like I get it. And I'm not trying to shame Pete Alonso here, but like I really do think Mets fans do not understand that he's not the defensive first baseman that we all think he is just because he can scoop baseballs. So I'm just saying. And honestly, Contreras is not a wild take. It's really not. It is
No,
really not. I'm
it
telling you that
is.
right now.
What was his stats last year? Like home run wise? Sorry, I'm making you do all the work here. I think you are mute or something. I think. I think you put yourself on mute.
Here we go. 2025, he batted 257, 20 home runs, and 80 RBIs. He had a 791 OPS. So, like I said, it's not all world, but
No, but again, with that Wilson Contreras, it's similar to Bellinger Schwarber, right? 20 home runs compared to connecting with or putting together with Schwarber gives you 50 to 60, 55, 60 home runs. Like that's the point here, is that there's a lot of pathways specifically for the starting pitching and the lineup where I think the Mets could use two. And again, name a combination. Somebody says, what about Luis Robert and Pete Alonso? Okay, I'm fine with that. You solidify your defense in the outfield. You give Carson Ben a chance to win the job in left field, and you go to war with that. I'm okay with that. I'm not against bringing back Pete Alonso, but if too many Met fans act like Pete Alonso is the difference between having a successful season or not, it's ridiculous because there's other pathways here. I want Pete Alonso is bringing back the same bullshit again. It is the same 1 through 4. Well, technically, 2, 3, or 1 through 4, except for Simeon are part of that now. If you think Simeon's the difference maker between those 4 guys, you're nuts. It's what is changing. You hope Lindor hits more home runs and more RBIs and has less cold streaks than Pete Alonso has the season he did last year, which could be a stretch. And then what do you do through 5 through 9? Like, we're not stretching out the lineup. We're dealing with the same stuff that we were doing last year. Like, Luis Robert is a big question mark. I'm not against it, but you're hoping for Luis Robert to find some life again. Or what are we dealing with here? Who's out third baseman? Is it Brett Beatty? Who's our left fielder? Could be Carson Bench. He's a question mark. There's a lot of, Alvarez. Who the hell is he right now? So your 5 through 9 is back to the same question mark it was last year. You can't have that again. You can't just be excited about 1 through 4 and forget 5 through 9 because we're going to be in the same predicament again. You're hoping, which again, here we go again. We're hoping somebody, 1 or 2 guys step up. And that's a big ask for guys that haven't done it enough to prove that they can stay in this lineup and be a part of this team. You got to stretch out the lineup. Why? I think you got to pair 2 bats. If it's Alonso and Robert, it's less of a risk because you know what Pete Alonso is going to give you. But if Robert steps up and finds new life, you got to win over here. That is why you got to pair bats together, Chris. I mean, that's just me, but it just feels like that's what it's they got to do, because bringing back just Pete Alonso is not exciting me enough. It's going to blind Met fans to euphoria, but it's not going to be good enough. It's just not. Like, Soto had a really damn good year. Pete Alonso had a really damn good year. Lindor had a very solid year. Nimmo had a good year. Where did that get us? So it shows you that 1 through 4 can do whatever they want. But if the rest of your lineup sucks, you're going to find a lot of losing games because you're going to get stuck with your lineup struggling to probably score runs just like they did last year. We had 3 guys every 1 through 4. We had all guys have over 90 RBIs. Yet we won 83 games. I know the pitching was really bad, but we did lose a lot of games because 5 through 9 was an absolute shit show. We can't have that again.
I agree, 100%. I mean, there's nothing else to that. I agree. And also, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, we've kind of talked about almost everything except for the Marlins and kind of got into the Keller situation a little bit.
I mean, we should start talking about pitching because that's the biggest need here too. I mean, that's really the biggest need.
Agree with you. Yeah. You want me to start with the Marlins?
Well, I think we should probably start talking about Framber Valdez. I think that's the biggest thing that's come out of today. So you could take the charge on that one.
Yeah. So when it comes to Framber Valdez, right, I think it's starting to pick up steam because I think the whole Joe Ryan situation and the Pablo Lopez situation with the Twins, where they might not be looking to trade their big starters, I think Framber Valdez is more of a possibility because what it does, it gives you an opportunity to use more of your assets in a trade scenario to get whatever you might need. I know Framber Valdez might cost you 5 years, possibly 6 at 180 to $200 million, but get over the fact that of the years and the money. Framber Valdez had his agent put together like a little video thing of, him showing his personality and, what he wants teams to believe in him and all that stuff like that because of what happened with him and the catcher last year. He is a very damn good pitcher. He's a very good postseason pitcher. He got that experience. He will lead the way. But this leaves a big opening for the Mets to trade for another starting pitcher. And I think they're going to do that. I've said this, and I think you believe me, Chris. The Mets are going to get 2 top starters. I mean, one might not be an ace, but one might be a very solid number 2. But I think they're going to get a very good to very close, if not an ace. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Mets sign Valdez and still go after Skubal. I mean, you kind of protect yourself with Valdez being under control with McLean if Tarik Skubal happens to leave. But the Mets have that opportunity to do that. I think it's a no-brainer to get Framber Valdez. Giving $200 million to Valdez is a lot smarter than giving $200 million to Dylan Cease because Valdez has been the better pitcher. He's performed in the postseason, and he's a World Series champion, where Dylan Cease has kind of, shoved it in big spots a lot of the times with the San Diego Padres. So I'm all on board to get Framber Valdez. Obviously, I think the Mets need to do one more, and I'm not against Peralta or anybody else. I would want Tarik Skubal, but you could do a lot worse than every other option you have.
So the way to get Valdez to 200 million, which I think is a pipe dream for any team, right? I think it's a pipe dream, is for him to get a long-term deal like 6 years. And that's just not happening with the Mets. Like, I genuinely do not like, I think that the Mets, I'm going to say this right now, and I actually said this on my video that I dropped on my channel before, is that I think the Mets have an offer out there to Valdez somewhere. This is just my general assumption, but I just don't think that it's going to be anywhere beyond 4 years. I think it's probably the sweet spot of what David Stearns likes to give out, which is 3 years. You know what I mean? Especially for a guy who just turned 32 years old last month. Like, that just seems like a David Stearns offer that he would give out. And so that's basically what you're battling, because I do think that some team will give Valdez 4 years. The report today was that the Orioles and the Mets, quote unquote, are among the favorites to land Valdez, right? And I think that the Orioles are probably a little bit more desperate, and their GM is a little bit more desperate than ours, or our president of baseball operations, I should say. I'll say that. And so, yeah, man, I don't know. I can see this Valdez thing playing out, but he's going to have to lower that asking price in terms of years. But I just don't know, besides the Mets and the Orioles, like what his market would even entail in terms of the teams that are going to be interested in on him. Because, I think we've both said this along the way, that the starting pitching, it's going to be a trade and it's going to be a free agent signing. Who are the biggest names free agent-wise that we've been hearing from the New York Mets perspective, right? We've been hearing about Valdez more than anybody else in the free agent market. Then we've been hearing about Tatsuya Imai, who's going to be definitely a 6 to 7 year deal worth $150+ million. And then we've been hearing recently today about Michael King. We could talk about Michael King if we want to, because that's also a very solid name that I would be on board for, given the correct parameters of a deal. And then we've also been hearing about, I've talked about this name one time on my channel, but we haven't heard any reports until today that the Mets are in the mix, but they're not listed as favorites, for Ranger Suarez, who's the other lefty option free agent wise. But you're not thinking about Ranger Suarez as a 1 or 2. Hopefully not. Valdez is definitely that. Imai is definitely that. And then most of these pitching targets from the trade market are that, with Skubal and Edward Cabrera, with the Marlins recent report, etc. Joe Ryan's a 1 or 2 for sure. If he ends up getting traded, which I think that, I don't know, Rosenthal versus Heyman, you choose who you want to believe there. So, yeah, if you are thinking about getting one ace and one mid-rotation guy, like a number 2 or number 3 to slot in alongside Nolan McLean, Valdez is definitely the guy to go after. He fits that mold 100%. I do not care what he posted in 2025. because some of the numbers were down, the metrics were down. He's had up and down years, but he's pitched in really big spots, and he's been a part of a general winning organization in Houston, and I'd 100% trust him at the forefront of this rotation moving forward. But that being said, 6 years, 5 years even, David Stearns is not doing that for Framber Valdez.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that you just keep on, rumors keep on popping up day by day with Framber Valdez with the Mets, and where there's smoke, there's fire. I think that it's more of a possibility than I think even you're thinking about. I think the Mets. The thing is, David Stearns was associated was a part of the Houston Nationals when they signed Valdez to an international free agent. He was a part of that organization. So he has familiarity with him. And I think that's the same thing when it goes for Devin Williams as well. That they knew each other and they had that common ground, or that, that I guess you say that relationship or so. I think Valdez is the same way. He probably has somewhat of a relation. I'm not saying a good relationship or a great relationship, but they clearly know each other. They clearly probably. And I think that's why Valdez is a big opportunity. Stearns is not afraid to get guys in here that he knows and that he thinks that he believes in. That's the reason why, it's weird because David Stearns don't want to give, 5-6 year deals to guys over 30 years old. But you're not talking to Framber Valdez if you're giving him 4 years. He's not listening to that. You probably have to get a 5th year on him at the very least. So David Stearns probably knows that. So if he's willing to go to a 5th year, maybe even a 6th year for Valdez, which I think that's a stretch, but who knows? I think David Stearns trusts that type of pitcher. And again, why would he do that? Because he knows the guy. He knows what he is. The guy is a bulldog. Everybody's like, oh, he's 5'11", 240 pounds. David Wells was drunk, fat, and ate all the time. And yeah, he was one of the best pitchers in the game and was one of the best pitchers in the postseason. And for the New York Yankees, like, he's the type of guy. He's not a fat guy. He got a stomach. Don't get me wrong, but he's a solid guy. We all love Bartolo Colon, that fat guy, right? But he pitched well. I'm not worried about him, and I think he's a guy that. And here's the other thing: we haven't really even talked about this with Framber Valdez. He's reliable. 30 starts, 32 starts, 190 innings. You want to find that with the New York Mets? When you need the innings, he'll give them to you even when he's not pitching well. That was the problem with the Mets last year. When Mets pitching didn't pitch well, they never gave them length. Framber Valdez, even if he's struggling, he will give you 6-7 innings. You're not getting that from other guys that we've seen from the Mets. When they struggled, they were out of the game in the 3rd, 4th, 5th inning. He won't do that. He will keep you in games, even when he's struggling. He will give you that 7th inning to protect your bullpen. You're not going to worry about that. That is what he does. The problem with the Mets rotation last year was reliability. We couldn't trust guys to give you innings unless they had a good night. That's a problem. I want guys that are reliable, guys that can pitch, and even when they don't have their best stuff. And Nolan McLean's a part of this because he's shown when he didn't have his best stuff, he kept the Mets in ball games. He was the only one. You need another guy like that, or maybe even two. So that is the other reason why. It's not that he could be, he'd be the best pitcher on the Mets, no doubt about it. Some might not consider him an ace, but he technically is. But if you get Skubal, he'll be a number 2. So, all right, let's put it this way, because since we're talking about pitcher right now, do you still believe, because it's been reported all offseason, that the New York Mets are going to get 2 top starting pitchers? And again, that's a solid number 2 that can probably hover around the number 3 and an ace.
The only way that they get 2, and I will stand by this, and I've been saying this since the beginning of the offseason, they have to trade Kodai Senga. They have to trade him.
I agree.
I mean,
they don't have to trade Senga first. They can sign and trade for pitchers and then trade them, right?
Having Sean Manaea come out of the bullpen is not out of the realm of possibility either. So that's one way to make, a rotation spot happen. It also still depends if what their idea is between 5 or 6 guys in the rotation. I know you have a very strong feeling about that and a very strong opinion about that. But I think that's why I said, I don't think that I think Senga has production days ahead of him. Not what we saw in 2023 by any means, but like the injury prone status of him is definitely always there. We needed him the most in 2025 down the stretch. He couldn't provide it. He's come to the Mets organization saying he wants to stay. He's got a 10-team no trade list, and we don't know. It's not public. We don't know who those teams on his list are, but you have to clear that roster spot. I'm sorry. Senga has good upside. Will we ever see that in New York? That's a big risk to even think about in the next 2 years, that he is solidified under contract to even take a chance on. Because Senga at the top of his game, we've seen what he can provide. But the only way the Mets go out there and get 2 top-line starters, like you just asked me, is if Senga is gone. And I'm still going to be under the assumption, in my humble opinion, that Senga needs to be traded. He really does. And I don't really care. I think the Mets care what package that's for, because like I said, I still don't think they're going to sell low on him. But at this point, if they've identified 2 pitchers that they want via trade or free agency, doesn't matter what the combination is, Senga has to be gone.
Well, then they need to do it then, because like if you here's the problem that they're gonna have. If they do sign and trade for 2 starting pitchers, you kind of handcuff your choice or your potential return for Kodai Senga, because teams know you're not desperate to get anything, because you know you have to get rid of him in this rotation. So you're not going to get anything. So you put yourself behind the 8 ball here. So I think that's why I said I think they need to trade Senga over the next 2 days, tonight and tomorrow, before the winter deadlines really get started, so you can really focus in on your rotation and not have to worry about getting rid of people. Because I mean, I think that's malpractice for this team, for this organization. You can't sign Valdez and go out and, or either sign a Mai or trade for a starting pitcher. Let's say it's Valdez and Peralta. I mean, you could keep Senga. I mean, what are you going to make him your number 5 starter? I mean, I don't think anybody's going to complain about that, but I don't want him on our team. I don't want a guy who quit on this team. And I think the Mets were fed up with him last year. He needs everything to be right, and I don't want to go to a 6-man rotation because it fucks up other guys in this rotation, as I've been talking about all year for the past 2 since they got Kodai Senga. The 6-man rotation sets up the potential of problems for other guys who don't like to pitch on extra rest. They feel like they're too strong sometimes. I'm not saying every pitcher, but there's 1 or 2 guys, I guarantee you, that don't want to pitch every 6th day. They don't want to do that. And you can't keep on doing this to these other guys to appease Kodai Senga, who needs everything to go right just to get on the mound before he even pitches well or not. He's not trustworthy. He's pitched, in 3 years, a year and a couple of months? He's pitched a year and a half out of his 3 years. That is not reliable. That you can't have these unreliable guys in this rotation and think it's going to be okay. You got to start learning your lesson a little bit. And if the Mets are serious to bringing 2 top starters in here, get rid of them. I know the return might not be great, but you got to make a decision. Again, another indecisive situation with David Stearns about Kodai Senga. Make the move. Do it. Get a reliever for him. It might be somebody who might not be good, but maybe hit lightning in a bottle. You got to make a decision on here, because you can't lose out on a potential better starter on the market, either in free agency or the trade market, because Kodai Senga was still a problem where you want to send him because of returns. It doesn't make sense.
If you can convince a team that they will take on the entire rest of his contract, and then you sell low on him for, let's say, a prospect or a low leverage bullpen arm, then yeah, I think that's definitely fine too. But I think that with what the Mets have set as a precedent, under the Steve Cohen regime, that they're just going to get these contracts off the books and also take on money as well. At that point, like, if you're getting nothing of value in return or close to it, and you also are expected to take on half of his salary or even anything of his salary, then it's just not worth it at that point. Just keep him on board. But if there's a deal, maybe even a package deal, that you can attach stuff to Senga and make things work there, and getting something in return and not having to take on any of his salary, depending on where he goes and what kind of market team it is, then that could also make sense as well. So I think things are very fluid with Senga. That's the one thing that, like, with the list of, candidates via trade from Jeff Passan that we've seen, that I'm like, I just generally don't know where David Stearns' mind is at with Senga, because I can see a situation where he stays, and I can definitely see a situation where they're getting multiple starters and he goes at any cost.
Here's another possibility about a trade, just with Senga instead of a package. Looking at a deal or a team that might want to try to contend. Like, I don't think the Brewers are going to take on $14 million when they're trying to get rid of Peralta for that money. But a team like the Tigers, you're trading Tyreek Skubal, but you're still trying to contend, right? You're not trying to trade anybody else. You're still trying to, make the playoffs next year. You give them Kodai Senga in a package, obviously, and that puts that guy in that rotate. It could put Senga in their rotation so they don't lose an arm. And obviously, they're probably going to get a pitcher, top prospect pitcher, either Sproat or Tong in that deal along with others. That sets them up to fill that rotation spot right now, have potential of their pitching prospect that we give and whatever else we might give. That might be appealing to the Tigers than just prospects because you fill that rotation spot with Senga. So that might be an option as well. Now, again, we know Kodai Senga has a limited no trade clause with certain teams. I don't know if the Tigers are on that or not. But you could do that because that might be enticing for the Tigers because they can get more prospects back in an overall package if they're just looking for prospects. But if you're still trying to contend, what are you filling in that rotation? Because if you're not going to spend money on big time free agents to replace Tarik Skubal, then you need quality arms. And yes, I know Kodai Senga is often injured, but he is a quality arm when he's healthy, and he could be a top pitcher if he's healthy. I don't think the Mets can risk that and keeping Senga. In my opinion, I think it's too risky because if you keep Kodai Senga, I think we're out on that 2 top starting pitcher market, and we're only going to get 1. And I don't know if that's the best idea for this team.
Listen, at the end of the day, like, I understand that Senga, like, we all understand his upside too, which is why we're like more than maybe not more than happy, because I just literally spent 5 minutes saying how I think we should clear his roster spot. But I do think that he could be productive, even given some of the question marks at the end of the day, if the Mets do decide to hold on to him. But these teams aren't naive. These other teams know that the Mets are having questions about him. The fan base is having questions about him. There's injury concerns about Kodai Senga. And I think that there's teams that will take him on, and they'll even take on maybe some of his contract, maybe half of it, because he's owed $30 million over the next 2 years. He does have a 3rd year attached to the back end. It's like conditional option, whatever. I'm not sure what metrics that involves, but I think teams will take on some of his salary. I just think that you'll need to make it a package instead for them to be enticed to do that. Now, when you're talking about trading with smaller market teams, the ball game changes a little bit, but like you're not gonna surround a deal. Like, the Tigers will gladly take Senga back, I'm sure, but like they're still going to be asking for Tong Sproat plus. You know what I mean? They're still going to be asking for that. So just including Senga is not going to be enough to be like, okay, well, if we're giving you Senga, you're not taking Sproat. Like, that's not how it's going to work, in my opinion.
But I'm still okay with that because I think it's addition by subtraction with Kodai Senga.
Sure.
If you're bringing in Tarik Skubal in here, and let's say you get a Freddie Peralta, or sign MI or something like that, I'm okay with that. I think it's addition by subtraction here with Kodai Senga. I think it kind of entices the Tigers to still be competitive this year with filling that rotation spot, and you could still give up Tong and maybe Benj and stuff like that, whatever the package might be. I think it's a risk willing to take because Tarik Skubal is the best pitcher in baseball. Like, it has to be for Tarik Skubal. I don't, it's not going to, no. I just want Kodai Senga off this team. I'm not saying not to get anybody for anything like that, but that is another pathway when it comes to a trade for the Tigers. And again, if Tarik Skubal is available and the Tigers are listening to teams that have reported that's happening, the Mets need to do it by any means necessary. It would be wrong It would be such a detriment in back-to-back years to lose out on Garrett Crochet and Tariq Skubal when they both were available and you were talking to these teams. You can't lose out on both of those two guys because that shows that David Stearns is what? Indecisive. He's afraid to give up too many prospects. Like that cannot be an option anymore. You cannot be afraid to trade. I'm not saying to trade 9 out of your top 10 prospects, but some of these guys are blocked. Some of these guys are blocked by other prospects that you might feel favor of. Pick a bunch of prospects that you're willing to trade and let's get it done. To finish up, we only got a couple of minutes left, but with the Marlins, we haven't really got into the Marlins at all. But Sandy Alcantara, Edward Cabrera, you brought that up to me earlier. If you want to bring it up real quick with Edward Cabrera, let's chat about it real quick.
Yeah, so and I think that we need to talk about this because this actually just released maybe 40 minutes before we came on stream here, and Will Salmon and Rosenthal broke this, saying that the Marlins are going to be interested in trading and listening in on offers on their pitchers outside of Yuri Perez, right? That's the one name that they're not going to be listening in on offers. So by that, with this report, you'd have to think Edward Cabrera is out there and Sandy's out there. You're a big Sandy guy. If I remember correctly, you think that Sandy is going to be a New York Met. And just because Jeff Passan did not list the New York Mets as a potential fit for Sandy this offseason doesn't mean he's not on the radar of David Stearns, right? Again, when we talk about the way that the Mets operate, sometimes you don't hear about a direct link until it actually happens.
Yep.
And so I think that the Mets and the Marlins, I know that in-division trades are really tricky, but I think that if there was two clubs between this NL East, I think the Mets and the Marlins match up pretty well trading with one another. And my mind, I know your mind's on Sandy. My mind directly goes to Edward Cabrera, who we heard some smoke about the Mets liking and being interested in at the trade deadline. And by the way, Will Salmon, just 20 minutes ago while we were on stream, said that there is a ton more interest from teams around the league to trade their pitching this offseason than there ever was during the deadline. Because even though the Marlins might have been listening in on offers, Sandy even thought that there was a 90% chance. He had his bags packed in Miami, ready to go somewhere. Yeah. No, they did. That was a report. He had his bags packed, and he ended up staying, which I'm sure surprised him too, as well as everybody in the MLB community. And so now seems to really be the time. And let's be honest, the offseason is always a better time to trade your pitching or any big name player than the deadline is, because you only get, especially depending on the contract. Now, this is not to say the same thing for Sandy or Cabrera, because they have multiple years of control left on their contracts, but I'm talking about rentals, right? Rentals are better off being traded for the most value this offseason rather than midseason, which is why when you talk about Freddie Peralta, I think Freddie Peralta is getting traded, especially with the way that the Brewers have been operating. He's got 1 year left on his deal. The way to maximize the potential of a return is trading them during the offseason. Anyways, Edward Cabrera, there's already a direct correlation there. He's got 4 years left to control. 2026, 2027, 2028, and 2029. Then he is an unrestricted free agent. I think he's 28, maybe 29 years old right now. Some of the numbers have been a little bit inflated, but the one thing that I took a look at and I was kind of impressed with, he had a career year when it came to the metric of the walk rate, because he has been a pitcher that has been wild and has not had his best command. And when he is able to get that command intact, the numbers elsewhere follow thereafter. And I'm not saying that he's going to be a number one. He's not an ace-like guy. He does have electricity, right? He has the put-away stuff, changeup, curveball, really good put-away pitches, fastballs at 97 on average. But that is a guy, when you talk about a mid-level starter, if you don't want to commit the $150+ million to Tetsuya Imai to be your number 3 behind Noah McLean, Edward Cabrera is right there. You just need to send over the necessary prospect capital for a guy that you get for cheap for the next 4 years in his arbitration years. So I like what I'm hearing from the Marlins perspective. I hope that this rumor and this report out of their organization is true, because they got some serious talent that is on the block there with those two names alone, let alone anyone else, that the Mets could definitely use. So I'm excited, man. Pitching, So many options, man.
Eh,
So many options and so many different combinations. And I think this is going to be a really interesting winter meetings. And I think that, we're going live on Sunday, right? So we're going to be talking about day one of the winter meetings. So we'll see you all then as well.
Yeah, and we'll definitely bring that up in just a second. But with Sandy Alcantara in general, Dolo said he's overrated. I know he was so overrated. He beat the Mets twice in September. All right, this guy performed outstanding in the second half. This guy is coming off Tommy John in the first half. It was going to take time for him to get his miles per hour back, get his feel back of the pitches, and when he did, he was damn good. 7 innings both times against the New York Mets in September. That would have been nice on our team, right? Sandy Alcantara, I think it would cost less asset wise, prospect wise, than Edward Cabrera because of the fact that Edward Cabrera is making no money at all. He has a similar amount of years. I think he has 4 years of control over 3 for Sandy, but because Sandy's making more money and the Marlins want to get rid of that contract, it's more likely that you can give a little less to the Marlins. And we know what the Marlins want from the Mets. Brett Baty is caught the Marlins' eye years ago. They still like Brett Baty, especially under control for a lot more years. And you can fit him right into the lineup. Yeah, you have to give probably I don't even, you might have to give up Tong, maybe AJ Ewan, maybe Santucci, something like that in that combination. I don't think it's going to take more than 2 top prospects, to be quite honest with you. I think you can get Baty, maybe a Santucci, and maybe another lower level prospect that's high on the list. I think you can do that because you are taking on that money. Now, that might not appease the Marlins, but if they still want to get rid of that contract, they have to be willing to take somewhat of a lesser deal. Edward Cabrera is going to cost you more. So with the question with Edward Cabrera with the control, that scares me because again, he would be a number 3 if you bring in a Framber Valdez or Freddie Peralta, Whit McLean. He'd be a number 3, so it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But if he's a disaster, now you only got 2 guys you can trust, and that's concerning. Sandy Alcantara is not a question mark. He's an ace. Now, he might not be as good as he was 4 years ago, but he's still a top pitcher. And if you want to call him a very good number 2, okay. If you pair him with Freddie Peralta and Nolan McLean or Imai or Nolan McLean, it's really good. And this guy steps up. Look at his numbers in September. In the last couple of years, even when he was injured, he was still good. It's insane. Like this guy steps up in big moments, as big as the Marlins could get. He was the one pitcher that was dominating for them in September when they were still in the hunt, when the Marlins were ready to pass everybody, like they were playing red hot. And it was because he was leading the way. This guy performs. And I'm not saying to get Sandy. Look, there's too many pathways to fuck this up. It's very hard to not get it right. I might not be happy with all the decisions starting pitching wise, but I'm not going to be against all these different pathways. If you can get 2 of these guys, whatever combination you want, it's better than what you had last year. And obviously on paper it means nothing, but it's a good start. And I still believe, and I said it from the beginning, I always said that the Mets want Sandy Alcantara. I still believe that. I think it was a possibility last trade deadline. I think the Marlins decided not to do it, and the Mets kind of handcuffed themselves in a lot of different situations. But this year, this offseason, I think the Mets aren't playing when it comes to these starting pitchers. I think David Stearns is clearly learning the lesson here. You're not hearing all these rumors with Valdez, who's over 30 years old. Same thing goes for Alcantara. These guys are over 30, but you know what? It's proven that these guys perform. You can't keep on relying on, reclamation projects and all these prospects that are question marks. You can't rely on that. You got to have proven talent in here. And I think David Stearns is starting to realize that. Chris, any final words? And then we'll talk about the hot stove on Sunday.
No final words. I think if you go and get Sandy, you got to get Mark Vientos in that deal, since that scuffle that they had there. They had that scuffle at Citi Field when Sandy hit Vientos, and Vientos didn't take too kindly to that. No, all jokes aside, I appreciate the stream. pop-up stream. Again, we wanted to get ahead of some of these rumors for you all. It's a busy time over the weekend. Not sure if we're going to have much time tomorrow, but Sunday definitely will be back, and I'll let, Rob talk about that. So hopefully you all are ready for an exciting winter meetings, and a winter meetings that all these reporters and insiders are saying that there's going to be a lot taking off quickly, and big names are prepared to sign very early, maybe even like a Schwarber or a Framber Valdez, who are looking to get their next team out of the way.
Yeah, exactly. And again, guys, with the meetings start on Sunday, me and Chris will have everything that's going on the first day on the winter meetings. I set it for 7:00 on Sunday, but time we'll decide what time is good. Depending, it's Sunday night football and all that. So we're trying to get everything together here. It's going to be Sunday night for sure. It's just a matter of when, and probably between 6 and 8. I think it's probably the best time, sometime around there. So we'll have everything that you need. What's going on first day of winter meetings and whatever else is going on. Hopefully the Mets make some moves before that, and we get to talk about it. So with that said, guys, thank you for tuning in to a special edition of the Mets News and Rumors, technically a hot stove edition, and we'll see you on Sunday, guys, with Mets Hot Stove for the first day of the winter meetings. Have a great night, guys. Let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.
Meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball.